In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro provides a comprehensive analysis of the geopolitical and economic dynamics surrounding President Trump's imminent visit to China. The discussion touches on the supposed weakness of the U.S. position versus China, the underlying systemic issues in the Chinese economy and governance, U.S. strategic advantages, particularly regarding AI, Iran, and Taiwan, and the pitfalls of the multipolarity concept championed by some critics. The episode also includes insights from the acting U.S. Secretary of Labor on economic progress, commentary on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, cultural critiques, and brief mentions of developments in Hollywood and American politics. Shapiro challenges the prevailing narrative in the legacy media that China holds the upper hand in its relations with the U.S. and that President Trump is entering the summit in a weak position. He emphasizes that China is, in reality, grappling with severe internal problems, including a slowing economy, a collapsing property market, high unemployment, and demographic challenges due to decades of the one-child policy. The Chinese government's growing overconfidence, according to experts like Zhang Huang, is partially a defense mechanism fueled by distorted perceptions of American decline, which are in part shaped by negative media coverage in the U.S. Shapiro warns against embracing the idea of multipolarity, shared global power with China and Russia, which is touted by the political left and what he terms the woke right. He argues that this notion undermines American interests and effectively aids authoritarian regimes. Going deeper into China's fundamental troubles, Shapiro outlines 5 major issues crippling the country's long-term economic strength. Demographically, China faces a severe aging problem and a shrinking workforce, which jeopardizes its capacity to sustain growth or support its social systems. Innovation is the second problem. China's centralized, autocratic mercantilist model stifles genuine technological creativity and competitiveness. Much of China's advancement depends on intellectual property theft and adaptations rather than homegrown breakthroughs. Third, China's debt is dangerously high, with opaque financial systems and state-owned banks masking massive bad loans, contributing to economic fragility. Fourth, despite China's large military, it lags behind the U.S. technologically, particularly in AI and modern military hardware, which limits strategic power projection beyond its coastal waters. Finally, the authoritarian government's lack of openness and competitive institutions restricts innovation, economic flexibility, and long-term sustainability. Shapiro emphasizes that the U.S. holds significant cards in its dealings with China, especially on Iran, Taiwan, and artificial intelligence. China's energy dependence on the Middle East, particularly Iranian oil, leaves it vulnerable. President Trump plans to pressure China to curtail its support for Iran, including halting the transfer of dual-use technologies that could help Iran's military and nuclear programs. The U.S. has already systematically targeted China's financial facilitators involved with Iran, further straining China's position. Regarding Taiwan, while the U.S. maintains a policy of strategic ambiguity, the existing alliances with Japan and other regional partners serve as a deterrent to Chinese aggression, making major changes to the status quo unlikely. On AI, Shapiro asserts that America is far ahead, with all leading AI companies headquartered in the U.S. He warns against calls, especially from left-wing politicians and some on the so-called woke right, to hinder AI development, arguing such positions would cede technological leadership to China and threaten U.S. economic and military dominance. The episode features a conversation with Keith Sonderling, acting U.S. Secretary of Labor, discussing recent positive labor market trends under President Trump's administration. Sonderling highlights that most new jobs during this period have been created in the private sector rather than government positions, with sectors like construction and manufacturing showing growth. Despite public pessimism fueled by factors such as elevated gas prices linked to the conflict in Iran, the administration underscores wage gains that outpace inflation and historic private sector investments by major corporations returning industries to the United States. They also discuss public concerns around AI and employment, with Labor Department initiatives focused on AI literacy and workforce training to help Americans adapt to technological advances rather than fear job loss. Shapiro critiques the recurring calls from certain American political factions to cede global power to Russia and China under the guise of establishing multipolarity. He points out Russia's disastrous military outcome in Ukraine, with staggering casualty numbers, and its failure to achieve its strategic objectives. The idea that America should accommodate or share power with such regimes is described as not only foolish, but dangerously misaligned with American interests. While President Trump has sought a pathway to end hostilities in Ukraine, the military repositioning within NATO member countries, particularly shifting bases closer to Russia's borders, reflects ongoing efforts to contain Russian aggression rather than accommodate it. The episode turns briefly to cultural topics, including Netflix's roast of comedian Kevin Hart, which Shapiro criticizes for descending into a series of offensive and inappropriate jokes, notably those made by Pete Davidson and Tony Hinchcliffe. Shapiro also addresses recent Hollywood buzz about Elliot Page reportedly playing Achilles in Christopher Nolan's forthcoming film, The Odyssey. He expresses skepticism about the claim due to lack of confirmation and cautions listeners against spreading unverified rumors. There is also a humorous mention of Ellen Page's disappearance from public view, with a promotional plug for Daily Wire merchandise aiming to find her. Shapiro discusses how Democrats and progressives are increasingly critical of America's founders, with figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and historian Heather Cox Richardson reframing the Founding Fathers as either Marxists or hypocrites for owning slaves. He challenges these claims, defending the sincerity and aspirations behind America's founding principles despite their contradictions and limitations at the time. The episode highlights the left's broader agenda to fundamentally transform American society and governance, contrasting it with Shapiro's view that America's founding values remain fundamentally sound and worthy of preservation. The episode covers updates on the deteriorating situation in Iran, with significant job losses and industrial contraction reported by regime sources, underscoring the regime's vulnerability. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's interview is referenced, in which he praises the shift in Arab states' attitudes toward Israel, crediting the pressure on Iran for driving unexpected regional alliances. Netanyahu also expresses his desire to reduce American financial support to Israel over the next decade. The overall narrative reiterates that China's support for Iran has backfired diplomatically in the region and left it strategically isolated. Amid the political and global analysis, Shapiro includes sponsored endorsements for services such as Pure Talk Wireless, promoting lower phone bills and better customer service, and ExpressVPN, emphasizing online privacy in an era of extensive surveillance. These segments blend consumer advice with a broader theme of protecting individual liberty in today's interconnected world.